Nick Nolte didn't just build a career, he built a life that looked untouchable. In 1990, he bought a secluded Malibu estate, 6,000 square feet of marble, mahogany, and silence hidden deep in Bonsall Canyon. From the outside, it looked like success, but inside, something else was building, something that was quietly slipping beyond his control. Then one day, he put it on the market for $8.25 million and walked away without explanation. So what really happened behind those doors? And why did one of Hollywood's biggest stars leave it all behind? Let's step inside this mansion and uncover the story it was never meant to reveal. The rise of Hollywood's most unpredictable star. Nick Nolte's story didn't begin with success. It began with instability. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska in 1941 into a household that looked ordinary from the outside but lacked direction underneath. His father worked as a traveling salesman, constantly moving, rarely present in a stable way. Nolte struggled early, not just academically but behaviorally. He was expelled from multiple schools, including college, and at one point had no clear path forward. Acting became a fallback, something he turned to after everything else failed. That background shaped the way he entered the industry. After breaking out with Rich Man, Poor Man in 1976, Nolte quickly moved into film. By the early 1980s, 48 Hours brought in around $78 million at the domestic box office, pushing him into the top tier of bankable actors. From that point on, Nolte wasn't just working. He was earning at a level few actors reached. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, he commanded multi-million-dollar salaries per film, while his movies continued generating strong returns globally. At his peak in the 1990s, films like The Prince of Tides and Cape Fear, which grossed over $180 million worldwide, solidified both his critical reputation and his financial standing. Over time, those earnings, combined with long-term royalties from film distribution and licensing, built a net worth estimated at around $50 million, money that allowed him to invest in something far more private than Hollywood itself. That success translated into money and into assets. In 1990, at the height of that success, Nolte made a decision that reflected both his status and his mindset. He purchased a Malibu estate in Bonsall Canyon for approximately $2.35 million. The property spanned 2 acres and included a 6,000-square-foot main house, a guest house, a lagoon-style pool, and a private tennis court. Architecturally, it represented classic luxury: mahogany entryways, Italian marble flooring, vaulted ceilings. But what mattered more was its location. The estate was hidden. Surrounded by trees, set away from public view, it offered a level of privacy that most Hollywood properties didn't. That was not accidental. At the time, Nolte was one of the most visible actors in the industry, but he chose to live in a space designed to remove him from that visibility. He could step away from production schedules, media attention, and the constant demands of his career. But that same isolation carried another effect. The boundaries once held his life together began to loosen. The routines became less defined, and over time that shift led directly into the next darker chapter of his life. Nick Nolte's 2002 breakdown that changed everything. By the late 1990s, Nick Nolte was living 2 completely different lives at the same time. On screen, he delivered performances that critics called controlled, layered, and deeply human. Off-screen, his daily life followed a pattern built around alcohol, stimulants, and increasingly risky substances. He has spoken openly about how that pattern formed. Drinking was never occasional. It became part of the structure of his routine, something that framed his day rather than interrupted it. Drug use followed the same trajectory. Over time, the behavior stopped feeling like excess and started functioning as a system, a way to regulate intensity, manage exhaustion, and maintain the emotional edge that defined both his life and his acting. That system escalated in the late 1990s when GHB entered the picture. At the time, GHB had already been classified as an illegal substance in the United States due to its unpredictable neurological effects and high risk of overdose. Nolte began using it regularly, including before physical training sessions. The drug produced a short window of euphoria and clarity, but it also disrupted coordination, judgment, and reaction time. On September 11, 2002, that instability moved into full public view. Earlier that day, Nolte took a strong dose of GHB before leaving his home in Malibu. As he drove along the Pacific Coast Highway, one of the busiest coastal routes in California, his behavior became erratic enough to alarm multiple drivers. Witnesses described his vehicle crossing lanes, drifting into oncoming traffic, then correcting abruptly. Within a short span of time, 6 different motorists called 911 to report the same car. That detail matters. 6 independent calls confirmed that the situation was not subtle, and it was not momentary. It was visible, sustained, and dangerous. When officers stopped him, the situation had already crossed from personal risk into public danger. Blood tests later confirmed GHB in his system. The arrest report documented impaired driving consistent with the drug's effects. At that point, the issue extended beyond addiction. It involved public safety, legal consequences, and a level of exposure that could not be contained. Within hours, the private pattern he had maintained for years became a public event. The photograph taken that day carried more impact than the arrest itself. It showed Nolte in a state that required no explanation: hair uncombed, expression unfocused, posture loose in a way that suggested physical and mental exhaustion. The image moved quickly through newspapers, television broadcasts, and early internet platforms. It circulated at a speed that was unusual for that time, reaching a level of visibility that extended far beyond standard celebrity coverage. The contrast amplified the reaction. In 1992, Nolte had been named People magazine's Sexiest Man Alive, representing a specific image of masculinity that Hollywood could market: strong, confident, controlled. The mugshot replaced that image with something entirely different. The shift did not require interpretation. It was immediate and visual. Media outlets repeated the photograph across multiple formats. Late-night television used it as material. Print headlines referenced it directly. The image became shorthand for a broader narrative about excess and loss of control. His previous work remained part of his career, but the public conversation centered on that single moment. Nolte later addressed the image with direct language, describing himself as looking like an asylum inmate out for a lark. The description matched the public reaction because it acknowledged the same reality without attempting to soften it. What followed happened outside that spotlight. Within days of his release, Nolte entered a psychiatric facility known for structured addiction treatment. The program lasted approximately 30 days and focused on detoxification from GHB, which requires monitored withdrawal due to its neurological impact. The process involved stabilizing the body, restoring baseline function, and addressing the behavioral patterns that supported long-term use. The action took place quietly, at a point when public attention remained focused on the arrest and the image. That interruption marked the first step in a shift that would define the next stage of his life, not through public redemption, but through sustained stability. Nick Nolte's quiet return after his darkest years. When Nick Nolte walked out of treatment in late 2002, the change began inside his physical condition. He removed alcohol, drugs, and cigarettes within a relatively short period after treatment. That shift required discipline at a level that had not existed in his earlier life. Daily routine became the central mechanism. Sleep schedules stabilized. Physical activity became consistent rather than impulsive. The goal was not performance, but recovery, restoring baseline function after years of strain. These adjustments did not create immediate visible results, but they created continuity, and continuity became the foundation for everything that followed. That foundation changed how he approached work. Before 2002, his career moved at a pace driven by opportunity and demand. After that point, selection replaced momentum. His filmography reflects that shift clearly. Fewer roles, longer gaps, and a noticeable move toward characters that aligned with his age and lived experience. This was not a slowdown caused by decline. It was a recalibration based on control. That recalibration became fully visible in Warrior in 2011. The film itself operated on a modest scale, with a production budget of approximately $25 million and a global box office return of around $23 million. Financially, it remained contained. Critically, it carried weight because of Nolte's performance. His role as Paddy Conlon required sustained emotional restraint. The character existed in a state of recovery, carrying regret, attempting repair without certainty of success. Nolte delivered that through pacing, silence, and controlled expression rather than intensity. Reviewers consistently highlighted the authenticity of the portrayal, linking it directly to lived experience rather than technique. The Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor confirmed that recognition across the industry. At the same time, his personal life shifted into something far more structured than anything he had lived before. His relationship with Clyde Lane held steady over time, and when their daughter Sophia was born in 2007, that stability became practical, not symbolic. By then, Nolte was in his mid-60s, and fatherhood at that stage required long-term consistency. It meant being present across years, not moments. School routines, daily schedules, and decisions that couldn't be postponed or improvised. That kind of structure replaced the unpredictability that had defined most of his earlier life. You can see that change clearly in how his career slowed after the early 2010s. Following Warrior in 2011, a performance that earned him his third Academy Award nomination, Nolte did not return to a high-output schedule. Instead, the gaps between projects widened. From 2012 to 2017, his film appearances became sporadic, now often limited to smaller productions or supporting roles. When he appeared in Head Full of Honey in 2018, the project carried a different kind of significance. It was not positioned as a major commercial release, but it placed him on screen alongside his daughter, who played his granddaughter. His selection of roles during this period shows a consistent pattern. He moved away from productions that required long, physically demanding schedules and toward projects that could be completed within shorter timeframes. That approach became more visible with The Mandalorian in 2019. Nolte provided the voice for Kuiil, a character that became central to the series' early reception. The role carried emotional weight and audience recognition. It allowed him to participate in a major production without the strain of traditional filming. In 2023, his appearance in Poker Face followed the same logic. The role was contained within a limited episode structure, filmed over a controlled schedule. These choices are consistent across more than a decade. Nolte did not withdraw from acting. He reduced the scale and duration of his involvement. In practical terms, his recent projects operate under a very different financial structure than the leading roles that defined his earlier decades. For streaming series like Poker Face in 2023, actors of Nolte's profile typically earn in the range of $75,000 to $150,000 per episode for limited appearances, depending on screen time and contract structure. His role in that series was contained, which suggests a total compensation likely below $300,000 for the project, far from the multi-million-dollar film salaries he commanded in the 1990s, but aligned with his current low-volume, controlled workload. His upcoming appearance in Crime 101, scheduled for release in 2026 under Amazon MGM Studios, continues that pattern. The project places him within an ensemble cast rather than a leading position. That structure distributes responsibility across multiple actors, reducing individual workload. It also allows him to remain present in high-profile productions without returning to the demands of leading roles. This reflects a long-term approach to work that has remained stable since the early 2000s. Financially, that approach is supported by the structure of his income. Nolte's estimated net worth, approximately $50 million, is not driven by current production volume. It is sustained by the continued distribution of his earlier films. Titles such as 48 Hours, Cape Fear, and The Prince of Tides remain in circulation across streaming platforms, television licensing, and international markets. These channels generate recurring revenue. Industry estimates place that income at around $2 million per year, providing a consistent financial base independent of new work. Health has also played a role in shaping this structure. Nolte has spoken about the physical impact of aging, particularly in relation to the type of roles he can sustain. Action-driven performances or extended shooting schedules require levels of endurance. This factor reinforces his shift toward shorter commitments and controlled environments. The adjustment is not reactive. It is integrated into his overall routine. Each project fits within a framework that has been stable for more than a decade. What stands out is the consistency of that reduction over time. The pattern holds across work, environment, and daily life. So looking at that pattern, fewer appearances, smaller roles, controlled timing, do you think he stepped back or finally took control? Let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.